Hello everyone, thank you for joining. This will be a presentation on 3DS Core and the steps to get certified. So our agenda for today, we have introductions, a little bit about Tevora, an overview of 3DS Core, how to get 3DS certified, and then questions and answers at the end. A little bit about today's presenters. We have Jason Peters, our Managing Director of Payments at Tevora. His background includes being PCI 3DS a qualified security assessor, being a PCI QSA. He has attained his CISSP, his ISO lead auditor certification, and has also gained his bachelor's degree in information security and computer networking and master's in information assurance and security. My name is Cody Firuta. I'm a senior information security consultant in the payments department at Tevora. And my background includes being a PCI QSA, a payment application QSA. I've also attained my CISSP, Certificate of Cloud Security Knowledge, ISO Lead Auditor, and have gained my bachelor's degree in Information Systems Management and master's in Business Administration with a cybersecurity focus. So we were decently qualified to talk to you today. A little bit about Tevora. We have industry-leading expertise. We were founded in 2003 and have over 120 employees with offices in Irvine, New York, and Fairfax, Virginia. Our services range from compliance, enterprise risk management, data and privacy, security solutions, incident response, as well as the full threat management suite, including segmentation testing, internal and external penetration testing, and web application testing. As you can see from our wide range of clients, we worked with businesses from across the industry, from merchants, restaurants, retailers, theaters, service providers, banks. If information security is a priority in your industry, we've more likely worked with you or in that industry. All right, a little bit about why we need 3-domain secure. Fraud is on the rise. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic, this has impacted our world in ways we haven't seen before, as well as the payment industry. Since stay-at-home orders were issued by various states, online e-commerce transactions have skyrocketed. However, the fraud for e-commerce transactions has also increased. The current economic conditions have therefore made it more lucrative and feasible for malicious actors to commit e-commerce fraud. A little bit about the PCI 3-domain secure. What is it? So the PCI 3DS Core Security Standard was developed in October 2017 by the PCI Security Standards Council. The PCI 3DS is comprised of 3 components. The components are the 3DS server, or 3DSS, which provides a functional interface between 3DS requester environment flows and a directory server, which would be another component. The 3DS server may also link to the acquirer to initiate authorization requests. Second component is a 3DS directory server, which maintains a list of card ranges for which authentication may be available and coordinates communication between the 3DSS and the access control server, which is the third component. And it helps determine whether authentication is available for a particular card number and device type. Third component, 3DS access control server, or ACS, contains the authentication rules that is controlled by the issuer and helps to verify whether authentication is available for a card and device type. So the PCI 3DS Core Standard applies to environments where any of the 3 core components are operating or functional, such as the 3DS server, the 3DS directory server, or the 3DS access control server. The standard of requirements is also organized in 2 parts. Part 1 is the baseline security requirements, which are the technical and operational security requirements for the 3DS environment. Part 2 are security requirements focused on the 3DS data and processes itself. So a little bit about the PCI 3DS roles and responsibilities and stakeholders involved. We have the payment card industry, Standard Security Council, and they maintain the PCI 3DS requirements and assessment procedures for the three core components, such as the ACS, DS, and 3DSS. They also maintain supporting documentation, including report templates, attestation forms, and frequently asked questions. They also provide guidance to entities for implementing the PCI 3DS. They provide training for assessors evaluating 3DS entities. They maintain a list of qualified assessors on the PCI SSE website, which our Managing Director, Jason Peters, will be present on. And they maintain a quality assurance program for qualified assessors to ensure that annually we're recertifying and our assessment techniques are up to par with their standards. Second, we have the participating payment brands. So the big card brands, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they maintain requirements, mandates, and deadlines for compliance with PCI 3DS standards. They determine which organizations are required to comply with PCI 3DS. They determine validation methods and frequencies for entities, as well as any fines or penalties for non-compliance. Lastly, we have EMVCo, which is the global technical body owned by the major card brands. And the EMVCo helps facilitate worldwide standardization and interoperability of different payment channels. And they're basically trying to guide us into the same place for our security requirements and standards. So what is 3D Secure Protocol in action look like? What does it entail? 3D Secure acts basically as a second form of end user authentication to ensure any high-risk transactions via online e-commerce payment channels are made by authorized individuals only. Once an entity is 3D certified, transaction data is shared in real time between the merchant, issuer, and acquirer to determine if a particular transaction is high or low risk. If the transaction is high risk, then a challenge will be issued to the end user for that second form of authentication. Sometimes it is a one-time password, or it can even be biometrics that's requested via a web browser or a smartphone device. If the 3D Secure Analytics determines the transaction is low risk, then no challenge is issued and the transaction proceeds as normal. So a quick overview of what those steps look like in the 3D Secure authentication process. Step 1, card information is collected. Customer inputs card information into the merchant site. Step 2, 3DS enrollment confirmation. 3DS software conducts a registration check to see if a card is enrolled in the 3DS program. Step 3, payment validation. If a transaction is considered high risk, second form of authentication will be requested from the end user via the web browser or smart device to verify their identity. Step 4, payment authentication. Once the payment is confirmed, an authorization message is sent to the merchant for the purchase. Step 5, all necessary authorization steps have been completed. The transaction proceeds as normal. So the card brands also all have their own 3D Secure services. One example is Verified by Visa. Verified by Visa is a password-protected authentication system designed to confirm the identity of a cardholder when a Visa card is used for e-commerce transactions. There are other examples like MasterCard Secure Code, Discover's Protect By, JCP's K-Secure. They all basically operate in the same method with that second form of authentication required for high-risk transactions. This Visa requires a secret password only known to the cardholder to be created, and that's how they verify that a cardholder is genuine whenever processing e-commerce transactions. There are also options for one-time codes such via SMS to be sent, or you can also opt for biometrics. Okay, so what is the relationship between PCI 3DS Core and PCI DSS? There is an independent relationship between the PCI 3DS Core and the PCI DSS. Because you're complying with one does not mean you have to be compliant with the other, unless your acquirer determines you do. So the 3DS environment could be part of the cardholder data environment or completely separate. However, you may leverage PCI evidence and requirements you've already complied with if your 3DS environment is inside your cardholder data environment. So that is the good news. And then there's a reference of what PCI requirements may be leveraged for PCI 3DS if they're in the same environment in Part 1, baseline security requirements of the standard, as well as the Appendix B, alignment between PCI 3DS and PCI DSS requirements. So you can reference those in the standard and the PCI 3DS standard for more details. And now I will hand it off to our Managing Director of Payments, Jason Peters, for an overview of the 3DS compliance steps.
Thanks, Cody. So when we look at how to comply with this standard, there's a lot of different ways organizations are tackling this challenge. And the QSAs that are working with organizations have their own methodologies. The methods that I'll be discussing today are specific to Tevora and how we look at and assess environments. So in general, the compliance to 3DS Core can be done in 5 steps. Now I know that the title of this presentation is 3 steps to 3DS Core compliance, and we'll see how that is specific to 3 steps in a minute. But essentially, you start off with readiness. What is the readiness of an organization? What Tevora will do will come in, some people refer to it as a gap assessment or a health check. That readiness is the first major step in obtaining compliance because it will level set where the organization is. It will help the organization understand the requirements themselves and how they apply to their environment. One of the challenges that we've seen with PCI, whether it's the data security standard, 3DS, or some of the other payment application standards, is the confusion around what the SSC has said and what the SSC means. This isn't a negative towards the PCI SSC. This is a statement more so around just general understanding of the requirements and the credit card industry as a whole. The steps listed here, 2, 3, and 4, remediation, penetration testing, cyber risk assessment. These are things that can be done at the organization level, and they could remediate findings from the readiness assessment. They can go through and have active penetration testing done either by their own qualified individuals or by hiring a third party like Tevora. Additionally, a risk assessment. What is the risk posed to the environment? What is the risk posed to the payment process? Now, one thing that's different between the PCI DSS and the PCI 3DS is that there is risk-based approaches built into the 3DS. So what is the risk? The first key step in establishing a risk-based approach is performing a risk assessment and identifying what are the risks to the environment, what's the risk to the 3DS authentication protocol, and what's the risk to the sensitive authentication data. And finally, certification. Having an organization like Tevora come in and perform the assessment against the 3DS Core and providing you with a ROC and AOC specific to 3DS. As Cody alluded to earlier, this could be done in conjunction with a PCI DSS or done after a successful demonstration of PCI DSS security compliance, leveraging different controls there. The key is that you're working with an organization that's, number 1, qualified to do the assessments, and number 2, certified to do those. So Cody, if we can go to the next slide, please. So how do we run our engagements? What do we think the best methodology is for organizations? And it's kind of a tried and true idea to compliance here with the plan, do, check, act approach. Detailed scoping and planning is the first thing. So we really want to understand the organization from a business perspective. What are your business objectives? How are you trying to leverage 3DS to either grow your business or provide another layer of security within your organization? And then what's your timeline to demonstrate compliance? Are there any external pressures from an acquirer? Are there any external pressures from a card brand? Once we're able to come up with a detailed scope of the environment, where the technologies lie, how they're interacting with the 3DS servers outside of the organization, we can really put forth a plan on how we're going to assess and validate the environment. The do is the assessment activities. At Tevora, we run our projects in typically 3 phases around 3DS. So again, with the 3, but we usually have a pre-assessment phase, assessment phase, and post-assessment and report development phase. The pre-assessment phase is the kickoff call. We issue an initial evidence, document, and interview request list so that the organization can understand what we'll be looking for, what information they can provide up front, and who we'll need to speak to in order to demonstrate compliance within the environment. The assessment activities, currently not on site because of the current pandemic. However, we do use screen sharing technologies to perform remote guided observations of technologies and business process. We conduct interviews. And the biggest challenge is anytime we discuss physical security controls. Right now with the pandemic, physical security controls are demonstrated through either video or pictures, images that can be shared along with more detailed interviews and business process analysis. The check and the review of documentation, one of the things that continues throughout the assessment, whether it's in the planning phase or in the actual assessment activities, is documentation. We're gathering documentation on the environment, the previous tasks that have been completed, whether it be vulnerability scanning, vulnerability management, patching, risk assessments. Additionally, within the organization, we want to make sure that they're reviewing their documentation annually, in some cases for policies and procedures. They're reviewing the results of their scans, and that they're reviewing any security bulletins or information that's arising from participation in the program. And finally, the ACT, report writing, compensating controls if needed, and environment remediation discussions. So if we do identify anything. The report writing is fairly straightforward. Tevora writes all of their reports based off of 2 key things. The first is, does it meet Tevora's requirements for providing a client deliverable? Is it spelled accurately? Does it have punctuation? Does it meet our standards? The second part is, does it meet the PCI SSC standards for how reports are documented? So the SSC actually has standards that we have to adhere to, and on a regular basis, they review the work product that we provide clients to ensure that it meets their standards, and additionally provides the right information within the reports as prescribed by the card brands and the acquirers. Cody, if we could move to the next slide, please. So the assessment delivery approach, I think, is one that, while I talk about the 3 phases, I want to just make sure that we really kind of go off the fact that this is something that it isn't linear. When you work with Tevora, we like to develop business partnerships that last for a long time. So once we start the project, we do the kickoff call and the planning, document capture, our interviews, our testing. If there's any remediation that needs to be done, we're there to support you. Finally, we get you the report. Now, I think that there are organizations out there who do 3DS assessments, and having been on the other side of the assessment table and managed organizations, I know that there's times when you work with a company and it's a one and done, or here's your report and we'll see you next year. That's not Tevora's approach. Once we deliver the report, we're really looking to start planning for next year almost immediately, so that as changes occur to the standard, as additional guidance is released, as your organization matures or decides to make changes or pivots its business model, we're here to answer your questions, to provide you guidance, to help you plan for your future assessments and maintain an environment where you can continually demonstrate compliance. We do this in a couple different ways. One is we always assign a project lead for the assessment activities. So the project lead, we also assign a technical lead and a project manager. So the project lead will be the escalation point. That is the person that, if we're not getting what we need, if things aren't happening the way they should, there's an escalation point to kind of move things along. Technical lead. The technical lead will typically be the assessor, the person who's actually working with our clients to demonstrate compliance, to review the evidence, to gather the information that we need in order to document a compliant report. And of course, a project manager. Tevora has dedicated project managers that are assigned to each project that we work on so that we have a good, honest project management process. Some organizations will rely on consultants to be the project manager. What we found is that puts too much responsibility on one party, and it doesn't allow the consultant to be effective with the management of their project, because now they're either a project manager or they're the technical lead or they're the project lead. It becomes a little bit too confusing. It becomes too much of a burden. So having a dedicated project manager really helps our clients when it comes to demonstrating compliance with these standards. Cody, if we could go to the next slide, please. So I really wanted to open it up now for question and answers, see if there was anything that we could help with, if there was any particular items that people had questions on.